So you're getting tired of it? That's the manager's chair. Yeah. Yeah.
I have 7:30, Mr. Best. Shall we get started?
Absolutely. Welcome to the October 4th Transportation Commission meeting. First item on the agenda is citizen comments, and we have one speaker for this. We have Sada Askarvova.
Hello. My name is Sada Aksartova. I'm a Boulevard Manor resident, and I'm here today on behalf of Friends of Upton Hill to talk about plans to renovate Upton Hill Regional Park proposed by the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority, which recently renamed itself as Nova Parks, which owns the park. I want to alert you to Nova Parks' plan to expand surface parking at Upton Hill related to building a new fee-based amenity, a climbing structure. Upton Hill, as you probably know, is one of the few remaining forested parcels in the Seven Corners area. It is a welcome oasis that serves as a green buffer between the vast paved expanses of Seven Corners and several Arlington neighborhoods. The added parking will consume more than 25,000 square feet of unprogrammed green space and will involve cutting down about 50 trees. The existing parking lot at Upton Hill has 132 parking spaces. The lot is used most actively during the 3 summer months when the water park is open. It sits mostly empty for 9 months of the year. Nova Parks plans to expand parking by about 100 spaces. It has not provided any metrics showing the need for expanded parking. It is not clear if current user demand for the park requires expansion of the existing parking lot, and if so, by how much? And for what periods of time? Because the parking lot does get very busy on a few weekends in summer. I live right next to the park and I'm pretty familiar with how it's used. How those numbers were derived remains unknown. A Freedom of Information Act request to Nova Parks for the metrics and assumptions related to parking expansion yielded no responsive records. Nova Parks only provided the existing conditions and proposed expansion civil engineering plan for the parking lot used in the LDA application submitted to the county. It has not explained how the size of the expansion was determined, a calculation of lack of parking spaces to accommodate current users and for what period of time, or an estimate of the number of future users of the climbing structure and how much parking they are expected to need. At present, I will note Upton Hill does not have a bike share station. It is served by a metro bus line that runs along Wilson Boulevard. Friends of Upton Hill believe that new surface parking at Upton Hill is not only unnecessary, but is utterly inconsistent with the county's transportation and land use policies. It is also inconsistent with a successful road diet on Wilson Boulevard, which was put in place by the county in recent years after a 10-year effort by Blue Mont Civic Association. So I urge you to scrutinize Nova Parks' plans. Several county commissions weighed in on this renovation project, and I think you should do the same. Nova Parks is not very transparent. We have to use FOIA to pry out information that should be made public, as a matter of course, and that's kind of unacceptable too. So we have a lot of detailed information at friendsofuptonhill.org website, which we had to create because otherwise there is no public information about this project. And I will be happy also to follow up with you with a written note, sort of accompanied with photos and additional explanations of my points presented today. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I would note, while I'm personally sympathetic to everything that you've said, the Transportation Commission's job is to advise the county board, and my understanding is the board, this will not go forward for board approval, and so there's very little purview that the Transportation Commission has to weigh in on this. Largely, the development is being done by right, and the approvals are staff only, is my understanding. Yeah.
Can you play any constructive role in getting the information out of them? Because, for example, the Urban Forestry Commission had them present and engage with them, and some information was put in the public domain as a result of that. The Urban Forestry Commission wrote a letter, which it seems worked in that Novo Parks eliminated some of the most harmful aspects of their project. So I guess that's what I'm urging you guys to do, whether you can do the same.
Understood. Thank you.
Is it appropriate for somebody to make a motion to place this matter on a future agenda or not?
No, that's usually something we just deal with internally
Okay.
so that we can have conversation, because I don't think, for the reasons I outlined earlier, that it's actually appropriate or within the bounds of our charter in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I would ask you to double check that, because as Sada indicated, the most harmful component of the project has been eliminated, but not all. And the part that appears to be next most harmful is the expansion of a parking lot, which is a transportation issue. So that's why I think there might be some. In other words, you're basically saying we can't address any matter that does not come before the board, the county board?
Essentially. Thank you.
Our next item is item 2. This is the regional travel survey, the Arlington oversample. This is an info item. Rich is here this evening to give you an update.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I don't think the commission was briefed on this when it launched, but hopefully you're all aware that for the last 12 months, the Transportation Planning Board has been conducting its once-a-decade regional travel survey, also called the Household Travel Survey. And it's done every 10 years. It drives the regional travel demand model, as well as provides a valuable data source for the region and for Arlington County to analyze travel behavior. It is a massive undertaking, a multi-million-dollar project, part of the reason it's only done every 10 years. As I said, it's been in the field for the last 12 months, and it is starting to wind down. It will officially wind down toward the end of this calendar year. When finished, the TPB will have collected responses from nearly 15,000 randomly selected households across the region, including here in Arlington County. Just briefly where they are, and this is taken from TPB materials in terms of where they are and their target overall. They're projected to exceed their target, being 106% of their target, which again is 15,000 households across the entire region. And the region in this case for TPB, the modeling region, is larger than the actual planning region supported by the TPB. So it actually goes as far out, as far south as Fredericksburg into King George County, as far west as Clark County into the West Virginia Panhandle. And then on the Maryland side, goes up into Anne Arundel into southern Maryland, including Calvert and St. Mary's County. So it's a much larger area than their planning area. But they are expected to exceed their target sample for the region by around Thanksgiving. Within Arlington, the regional target is 800 completed surveys within Arlington County, and that's broken down between the county's activity centers, where the sampling rate is higher, and then the less dense areas of the county. As of September 7th, we were at 94% of target, and by TPB's projections, we are expected to hit and slightly exceed the target by Thanksgiving, about 102% of target, so just over 800 complete surveys. However, The TPB's targets and their sampling rates for individual jurisdictions is done to maintain statistical significance at the regional level, allow them to do regional analysis, and to a certain extent, some sub-regional analysis, but not at the jurisdiction or sub-jurisdictional level. So for that reason, the county, as it did 10 years ago in the 2007-2008 surveys, is funding a oversample specific to Arlington County. And that oversample is getting ready to launch probably next week. It was going to be this week. We ran into a few contractual issues. And so there will be some information going out through the county's regular communications channels. However, we're trying to drum up as much support as possible. The oversample is going to be occurring in 4 areas of the county: the RB corridor, Columbia Pike, Pentagon City, Crystal City, Potomac Yard, and Shirlington. And it will basically double the amount of responses, assuming we stay on target, double the amount of the responses within the activity centers. It will allow for county and sub-county analysis that could not be done if we just stuck with the completes done by the TPB. As I said, this was done 10 years ago. It's being done again this year. This is just to make everyone aware of it. When the communications and engagement goes out, hopefully again early next week, I will make sure that it goes to the chairman and to all commissioners. Please share it. Again, it's random selection, so it's not something where you can just volunteer and click on the survey. You have to be randomly sampled. But to the extent that we get the word out, we'll increase responses, and the more responses we get, the better analysis that we can do going forward. General timeline, TPB expects to finish all data collection by the end of the year, and then I think they're targeting almost 9 months to a year to do all the processing. So about a year from now, we'll receive the data file, and then we'll be able to do analysis as we see fit. So I encourage you to go to the survey website if you need more information. I can answer some questions. It's www.regionaltravelsurvey, all one word.com. So stop, take any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Look forward to seeing the results.
All right.
Item 3 is the next item. This is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, also known as HSIP funding. This is an action item. Again, Rich will present this item.
Sorry, I have to move down to the chair for this one because it runs slides. So just a moment. So again, good evening. Periodically, we come before the commission to seek approval to apply for various grants for transportation improvements. Can't hear me? You can't see. All right. I'll pause for a second. I'm still on the title slide, but for each grant program, for most participation in most grant programs, we require county board approval, and before that, we come to the commission to seek their endorsement of grant applications. All right, that's a start.
Now we can see.
Okay.
Well, now we can see ourselves. That's not.
You can see yourselves, it's
This
fine.
is not okay.
So as Mr. Bess indicated, this is an action item. We are looking for the commission to endorse a staff recommendation for the county to submit applications to VDOT for fiscal 19 supplemental and fiscal 2020 highway safety improvement program, seeking up to $1.5265 million in funding for 4 projects, and to transmit the commission's endorsement of the projects to the county board for their consideration at their October 20th meeting. You should have received a updated draft board report. It should have today's date and draft for Transportation Commission on it. There were some slight modifications made versus what went out over email earlier this week. The earlier version did not have completed information on project number 4, the Hawk signals. That information has now been filled in, and the end result is that the net ask has gone up by $135,000 over what you saw over email. That is a result of 2 things. It is adding the Hawk signal, a single Hawk signal for the application at $175,000, and the number of RRFBs, the flashing beacons, has been reduced from 7 to 6, so that reduces the overall ask by 40,000. So again, the net add is $135,000. These are the 4 proposed project applications: intersection improvements at Arlington Boulevard and Washington Boulevard at a little over $1 million. Improvements on the North Courthouse Road corridor just outside this building at $60,000. Installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons, RFBs, on priority corridors at $240,000, and the high intensity activated crosswalk or hawk signals at priority locations at $175,000. Again, county board approval is required to participate in grant programs managed by the Commonwealth, and there are no other issues identified at the time of the draft board report that you have in front of you. HSIP is a core federal aid program that has been continued in the current transportation legislation, the FAST Act. Its purpose is to achieve a significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries on public roads, and those are for all travel modes. It's a cost-sharing program where the feds participate 90%, and then 10% is contributed by either the state or the locality. In this case, I'll emphasize this again, and it's emphasized in the fiscal impact statement of the board report. Current VDOT guidance on HSIP indicates that the state provides the 10% match, so there are no local funds required for this program at this time. VDOT administers the program in coordination with the Federal Highway Administration, and in the last round of funding, which you saw and endorsed about a year ago, the county received just under $2 million to do improvements at the Washington Boulevard and Arlington Boulevard interchange. But it's such a massive undertaking that we actually just split it into 2, which is why we're coming back for this cycle to apply for more money. There are 4 main program elements within the Highway Safety Improvement Program. The core program is just called Highway Safety Program, HSP. Then there are systemic safety improvements, also called SSI, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Program, BPSP, and the Highway Railgrade Crossing Safety Program, which is not relevant to Arlington County because, as far as I know, we do not have any grade crossings within the county. All applications are made through VDOT's Smart Portal. This was previously only for Smart Scale, but VDOT is slowly migrating all of their state grant programs into this web-based application system, and the applications are due on November 1st, 2018, hence the need to get approval at the October board meeting. The county will apply this year for HSP, SSI, and BPSP, and for the first two programs, Highway Safety and SSI, you can actually double dip, so you can apply for both programs in a single application, which we will do for the big interchange improvement. The VDOT Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or PSAP, provides guidance on specific locations or corridors for the bicycle and pedestrian safety program. And VDOT announced recently a special pool of supplemental fiscal 19 funds, around $8 million statewide, for these locations. And they're looking for quick responses. So these projects that go in under the PSAP guidance, or PSAP supplement for BPSP, must be ready for construction advertisement by next March and need to be turned around very quickly. So we've identified projects that we think meet that criteria. HSIP funding is generally available for roadway projects that improve safety at high crash locations. The applications must document previous safety issues at the location, include a safety study and a benefit cost analysis. Again, this is for the HSP and the SSI program. For bicycle pedestrian safety applications under the current PSAP opportunity, it's a much less stringent set of application requirements, still data driven, but benefit cost analysis is not required. Arlington doesn't always apply for HSIP funds. It depends on funding availability year to year, whether or not we have projects in the pipeline, and there are caps on awards which we don't want to exceed in a given year. Again, this is why the big interchange was split over 2 funding cycles. However, staff determined that this cycle there are many viable projects that will compete well for funding and can be quickly delivered for the PSAP supplemental funding, which is why we're moving ahead. So again, these are the 4 project applications. The Arlington Boulevard and Washington Boulevard interchange improvements will be applied for in HSP and SSI, and then the 3 following projects are going to be applied for BPSP under the PSAP supplement, Courthouse Road, the RRFBs, and the Hawk Signal location. Arlington Boulevard and Washington Boulevard is consistently identified as one of the top 10 crash locations in Arlington County, and anyone who's gone through it on any travel mode understands it's very, very dangerous, has significant operational issues. The project will design and construct multimodal safety improvements to the interchange and modify traffic operations. As I mentioned previously, during the last cycle of HSIP funding, the county received $1.878 million in funds starting in FY 2021 to do the eastern half of the interchange, so the 2 ramps and associated roadways on the eastern side of the interchange. This cycle, we plan to apply for just over $1 million to do the western half of the interchange. So we'll get the whole thing taken care of. Along North Courthouse Road, the corridor between 15th Street North and Clarendon Boulevard, again, just outside, and you can see the picture shot with Bayou across the street up near the courthouse. This is identified in VDOT's pedestrian safety action plan as a priority location. There are 6 pedestrian crashes between 2012 and 2016 along this corridor, including 1 fatality. Staff is proposing to install curb extensions to lower crossing distance and slow turning movements at the 15th Street North intersection at an application for up to $60,000 in funding to implement this project. And this is one of the quick response ones that can be done by taking it to bid next spring. The RFBs on priority corridors, again, RFBs are pedestrian activated flashing lights that supplement warning signs at unsignalized intersections or mid-block crosswalks. The photo on the upper right is taken on Columbia Pike at South Frederick Street. Because Columbia Pike is under construction, there's barricades up there and it looks a little bit run down, but the RFB continues to function normally. We're proposing to apply for up to $240,000 at 6 locations along the priority corridors that are identified in the plan. You can see there are 3 along George Mason Drive, 1 on Lee Highway, and 2 on Washington Boulevard. The Hawk signal is used at a mid-block pedestrian crossing where conditions warrant a higher level of traffic control than an RFB. Again, on the lower left, there's an example of an existing Hawk signal on South George Mason at 13th Street South, looking northbound. Instead of flashing lights that you have in an RFB, the Hawk displays a progression of flashing and solid yellow and red signals when pedestrian activated. There are several candidate locations currently under analysis. Only one will be selected for the application for BPSP PSAP supplement funding and an estimated cost of $175,000. The intention to submit grant applications requires the communicate level of engagement under our public engagement strategy. Assuming funding is awarded and we begin project initiation, we will then proceed to communicate and consult, or communicate, consult, and involve, depending on the size and scope of the project. And that, of course, is contingent upon grant award. So again, we're asking for the commission to endorse the staff recommendation to submit these applications to VDOT for up to $1.5625 million and transmit that endorsement to the county board for their consideration on October 20th. I will be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Price?
Great projects, great presentation. Thank you very much for it. I like to ask the one question that usually comes with something like this is, were these the only projects under consideration for this application? If not, what was left off the list?
So they were not, and I will tell you what did not make the final cut. For the big project, the big interchange project, that was the only one under consideration because of the size and scope and because this was essentially deferred from last cycle given the cap on HSIP awards, and we knew when we only submitted for the eastern half last cycle, we were going to go for the western half this cycle, so nothing else was considered for the big programs. For the PSAP supplemental stuff that came through and was announced not that long ago, there were a couple other priority corridors that were identified in VDOT's plan, one of which was North Glebe Road. Staff looked at both North Glebe at North Carlin Springs and North Glebe at North Randolph, both of which have been recently reconstructed due to development activity in the area, and decided, given that, they were not worth pursuing in this funding cycle. There was also consideration of a change in signal operations at North Courthouse and 15th Street North to add a pedestrian lead phase in the signals, but that was ultimately withdrawn in favor of the curb extensions. For the RFBs, the following locations were also considered but did not make the final cut. Lee Highway at North Kenmore Street, but VDOT is going to implement that on their own, so the county doesn't need to pursue it. Wilson Boulevard at North Emerson Street, and North George Mason at North Park, where installing it now would interfere with the construction of the LeBron Community Center and the associated sidewalk improvements. So if we put it down, it will just be torn out again. So that was ultimately not pursued. And on the Hawk signals, again, multiple locations are being looked at and analyzed, but only one will be selected. But I don't have the specific locations that are under analysis at this time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Going back to the big interchange, aren't both of those roads VDOT roads?
They are.
And so isn't the whole thing 100% VDOT controlled?
I would expect so, but we'll be working closely with VDOT to manage the.
Why is it sort of, since VDOT would have been 100% paying for it anyway, and they just paid for that bridge, didn't they? I mean, we're just finishing up that project.
You're talking about the Washington Boulevard to Columbia Pike Bridge?
No, the one at Route 50 and Washington Boulevard.
Yeah, that project was, the bridge was done about 8-10 years ago.
Long ago already?
Well,
Wow.
6-8-10 years are starting to slip by.
You have Mount VDOT next to it, and it's...
Yes,
but-
well, actually, originally, that was to be, we were involved in a study probably 20 years ago to do the full interchange and the bridge, and that went back and forth for over a decade, and then it was decided just to do the bridge and some very minor improvements.
Okay,
And that
so-
really, that fixed or updated the bridge, but really didn't address the rest of the interchange.
Right, which is pretty inadequate. Okay, so that's the history of why we're here
Yes.
and why we're pushing it, even though it's a VDOT, total VDOT facility.
Correct.
So I think there's maybe a clarification that might be helpful. All jurisdictions in Virginia, other than Arlington, Henrico, and the cities, have to work with VDOT to make road, they basically prioritize and ask for money for projects they want done, even though VDOT owns all of the roads in those jurisdictions. Arlington's a little bit unique in that we actually do maintain and operate most of our roadways, but it's the same way that if we want money from VDOT, we could have asked for it for an Arlington road that we maintain or for a state road.
All right, and in this case, it's 90% federal. VDOT is kicking in 10%. You will see when we actually go to bid, whether it's a county-administered project or a VDOT-administered project. Either way, both parties are interested in improving the safety of the interchange, and we'll move forward. So,
Okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Commissioner Boucher.
Yes, I just want to confirm that. For these 4 projects, it's 90% federal, 10% state, correct?
correct. That is correct.
The money we're asking for Washington Boulevard and Arlington Boulevard, is that money enough to actually do anything, or is that analysis and design money?
Oh, no, if we get the money plus the previous award, we're coming up on $3 million. It's enough to do concrete improvements. It's not just an analysis project. Things will actually get built.
Right, but it's not going to, that's not enough to drastically remake the interchange, right? That's like minor improvements here and there.
If I had someone here from our Traffic Engineering and Operations Bureau to answer that, I think they'd be able to give you a more definitive answer. There are some fixes that can be done immediately, particularly on the northbound to westbound ramp with that short yield where there's curvature of the roadway anyway. I think there are some things that can be done relatively quickly with that level of money. So, but there's still design work to be done before we go forward. So.
But this isn't like signalization. This isn't major, drastic rework of the intersection.
I think you would be hard pressed to get signalization through VDOT's review process on that interchange. But improving ramp geometry, extending merge lanes, making it better for the path to cross through the interchange, those are the types of things we're talking about.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Move to approve the resolution authorizing applications to the Virginia Department of Transportation for the fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020 Highway Safety Improvement Program.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Where's number 2? Oh, I just went to the back. Authorize the county manager or his designee to execute the standard project administration agreements for approved projects, subject to approval of such agreements as to form by the county attorney.
All right, that's seconded. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? All right, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item is item 4. This is the 4 Mile Run Valley Area Plan. Richard Tucker from CPHD is here to give you an overview. Each of you have been emailed a link to the actual study, and you also have hard copy. The members that aren't here this evening, we're going to put this in the mail to them next week. We would ask you to hold on to this document because this is an RTA this evening, but this will be back as an action item on November 1st. And Mr. Tucker will autograph this for a small fee. Here. So please hold on to this document because this is you're only going to get one hard copy.
Good evening. What I'm going to try and do is run through some of the highlights pertaining to the development of the draft area plan and certainly take your questions at the end. We're at the juncture of advertising the draft. We've had an extensive 2-year process to get to this point, so hopefully, we did meet with you guys a few months ago, so I think that we're in a sort of a review stage, and hopefully we've captured everything that we need to capture, and I'll update you on some changes that we've made in the area plan as opposed to the policy framework, which was adopted in May. So just for a review, the study area actually includes 2 areas. The largely industrial area is what is considered part of the area plan, and that's outlined in the dark red. And then the park planning area is the grayed out area that includes Jenny Dean Park, Shirlington Park, and Shirlington Dog Park. The park master plan was adopted by the county board at their September meeting, so that is behind us at this point. And so we're moving forward with just the area plan at this point. Just some milestones for you. This, again, has been a 2-year process. It's kicking off in June of 2016. The charrette that we held was well attended, over 100 people over the course of many days. In December of 2016, we had a couple of board work sessions to iron out some questions, one pertaining to the approach to parking for public and private uses. At that time, the board gave guidance to staff to continue to pursue on-street parking as opposed to seeking garage parking to solve problems in this area. We had an open house in July of 2017. Again, a good crowd. Some of the people, some newcomers to the process, we mailed to everyone in the 3 civic associations to make sure that everyone in that general area, Douglas Park, Knock, and Shirlington, was aware of where we were at that point. And we had the policy framework drafted earlier this year, and it was adopted in May. And that really solidified the concept plan, which I'm about to show you, and the policy recommendations that are incorporated in the draft area plan. We're pushing for advertisement in October and hopefully adoption in November. So looking at the study area and the zoning for this area, this is, again, primarily zoned for industrial uses, the M1 and M2, the purple areas. There's small areas of multifamily development or multifamily zoning that incorporate up near 24th Road and Glebe, the hotel sites in that vicinity, and then the publicly owned areas, including the park spaces and the trails. The concept plan, which I think you've seen before as well, really underscores the vision for this area, which is limited change, keeping the industrial character for the area. One of the key questions as we started this process was, you know, what did we want for this area? What did the community want? In this area, due to the industrial zoning, a lot of auto repair, pet services, storage, things that people kind of need in an out-of-the-way place has located in this area over time, in addition to other industrial uses like a concrete plant. And so the question was, you know, if this area were to be envisioned as something else, where would those types of uses go, and how far would people have to go get the cars repaired and things of that nature. Fortunately, people felt some affinity for those types of uses, understood the utility of having those continue to operate in Arlington. So this concept really underscores the idea of limited change. So going from left to right, sub-area A, which is between Barcroft Park and Walter Reed Drive, is contemplated for limited change. That's the light blue shading. Sub-area B is preserving the existing uses, but also encouraging arts uses and other creative uses that might complement them. There is a healthy core of arts uses, including the 3700 building, which the county owns, where arts users are currently housed, that could be built upon and expanded in this area with some incentives. Throughout most of sub-area C and D on the right, they're again keeping the existing uses, but also on the edges adjacent to the Knock revitalization area, which is outlined in purple. There are some areas that are called for mixed-use development, similar in scope and size to the Knock plan, and this is intended to sort of augment the recommendations of the Knock plan, where a number of those parcels are shallow and don't have the full opportunity to build out based on the amount of site area that's within the Knock revitalization district. Some of the major themes and ideas that have come through in terms of, I would say, big ideas that are in the plan include creating more access to the stream. Currently, unless you're crossing one of the bridges, you really don't get to experience the stream in a lot of places, or if, in many cases, if you're at the dog park. So we're creating a system here where there will be additional points of access to the stream and points where there will be overlooks as well. Primarily on the south side of the road, there would be 3 overlooks within Shirlington Park, and then 1 overlook at Walter Reed Drive on the north side. So this is just broadening the opportunity to experience the stream. We also talked about making more direct connections along the pathway for the 4 Mile Run Trail. So we look at potentially underpasses at Walter Reed and either an underpass or overpass at Shirlington Road. Another major idea is the reconfiguration of 4 Mile Run Drive. So this concept was floated with our working group and has been incorporated in the plan as well. And the reconfiguration would entail reducing the 4-lane configuration to a 3-lane configuration, keeping the parking on either side, and using the gained space to either install angle parking, which you see at the frontage of Jenny Dean Park, or additional sidewalk space on the south side of the road, creating more people space for people as they move to and from some of the interesting businesses and uses that might crop up in this area. This is a blow-up of the concept of angle parking, back-end parking along the frontage of Jenny Dean Park, which would be implemented as part of the redevelopment of Jenny Dean Park, which is currently funded in 2019 for 2019 and should be completed by 2021. So looking at that concept and how it might apply to this area, and this is a graphic that we added in the area plan, looking at the 4 Mile Run Drive at Oxford Street, you see the 4-lane configuration and on-street parking. So just by changing the configuration from two lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane, you gain space that can be used to augment the sidewalk space. So just by using paint, and we imagine doing this as an interim step that can be monitored to see if it's effective and doesn't cause, or problems have been addressed as part of the design, this is something that we can implement over the medium term with just paint and some planters and other amenities to make it a more people-oriented space. And then in the long term, sometime outside of the current CIP, if that is proved to be effective, we can come in and actually do new curb and gutter and plant trees, et cetera, to finish out the concept. So within this, there are considerations for gateways and wayfinding within the study area. Some of the major nodes being the major intersections, of course, entrances to the park, et cetera, and other locations where wayfinding signage would be appropriate. The trail hierarchy is also shown in the plan. As this is a fairly well-developed system in this area with 2 trails and some sidewalks that are not yet complete, but certainly can be made complete. This depicts that. One of the ideas that came across in a lot of the conversations with the working group and with the broader community is the idea of safety crossing Shirlington Road on 4 Mile Run Trail and connecting to the WNOD. And some of the conversation was about an underpass or an overpass. We elected in the first draft of the document to show an underpass concept. And certainly on the face of it, it seems the underpass is certainly less expensive, although there are technical issues with dealing with the floodway that would need to be worked out with the Corps of Engineers. But we thought this was a simple way to show a better way to connect people across Shirlington Road, in this case under. We got some blowback from folks who in looking at the graphics, and this is, there's a whole text box discussing, the technical issues and the design that would have to come later. People felt that we had already made a decision by just showing this particular graphic. And so what we've done is we brought in the language that accompanies the graphic to include both the underpass and overpass approaches, that these should both be studied, that they should be examined both from the standpoint of feasibility and also safety. And so that language has been added to the document to make it clear no decision has been made yet, although the Transportation Commission chairman prefers this option. So importantly, in the implementation chapter 5, we discuss on page 5.4, 5.5, we list a number of public improvements. Many of them are transportation related. Those are carried over in the implementation matrix, page 5.10, 5.11. So they're listed for everyone's review, and they range from safety, pedestrian, bicycle improvements, transit improvements as well, that can be implemented over time. And we've set a rough timeline or an expectation, whether it's short, medium, or long term, to accomplish those things. Obviously, some of them can be accomplished within the county's capital improvement budget, just their operating, repaving, and putting in new crossing markings and things of that nature. Other things we'll have to go out and find additional funding to do, and we project that they would be more long-term. So there's a lot of information or a lot of opportunity for change in this area from a transportation standpoint, so I invite you to peruse Chapter 5. Our schedule moving forward, we will be at the Planning Commission next week and the County Board either on October 20th or the 23rd to advertise this version. And then we'll come back next month with possibly some refinements, and I look forward to any comments or suggestions that the transportation might have for this document, and thank you at this point.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tucker. It's been a long road. Commissioner Clement.
Well, I certainly welcome the plan itself, but I'm concerned about going from 4 lanes to 2. I have heard complaints from a number of residents of Crystal City about the shrinking of Eade Street from 4 lanes to 2. And I think those complaints are legitimate. I myself use Eade Street to bike to Crystal City from 4 Mile Run. And most of the time when I do it, I see very few other cyclists. Well, of course, this is not going to be putting in a bike trail, but still in all, the shrinking of the road is a matter of concern to me, especially because the county is densifying. I mean, we may not think that we need the other lanes now, but we may very well need them in the future, especially if other aspects of this plan go forward. There's going to be significant densification of the Arlington area. So I have significant reservations about that proposal. Of course, that is not a showstopper. But I would ask you whether or not you've heard these objections from other residents.
Yes, we have, in fact, on 2 fronts. One is just from the standpoint of volume. I think the volume was about 15,000 cars a year.
It's approximately 15,000. One of the things going on here, we have 4 lanes today and a lot of left turns. And with that, we're really looking at a 3-lane configuration, which would be 1 through lane in each direction with a center turn lane. And what we've mentioned is we would test that first. So we would test the 3-lane configuration by pavement markings and planters. So we would test that for at least 12 months to make sure that it works operationally and safety-wise. So before any permanent going down to 3 lanes, we'd do an operational test like we have done on Wilson Boulevard and other places. And really with that, we see the benefit is picking up the parking. One of the other sort of hot button transportation issues for this study is parking. So we're trying to maximize the on-street, and one of the ways is to install the angled parking that would be south side next to the park. So this would be tested before permanent.
I think it's also important to point out that there's a stretch of 4 Mile Run Drive that doesn't even have a sidewalk at this point, and there's not really space to put one there at this point without shrinking the overall cross-section of 4 Mile Run Drive. So I think there's a certain argument to be made there that the ability to safely walk down a street is perhaps more important than flow of vehicles.
Another point I'd like to make is for much of 4 Mile Run Drive, when we look at the space in front of the buildings, what we see is a lot of cars parked on what we think of as the sidewalk, but the property right away, the private property actually juts into the street. So where we're walking, when we're walking on the south side of the road, is actually on their property. And so there's not formally people space for people to move about. I don't know if the chairman attended the walking tour that we did, but we were weaving in between the cars that were parked in front of the buildings all along there. So, I think there is a need to create the people space that would, make this a better place and more hospitable for pedestrians.
Yeah, I mean, cars get parked on the sidewalk, and there's nothing that can be done because it's not actually public land. Commissioner Calkins.
I want to say thank you for bringing this to us. I remember the first time you brought it and the combination with the park and seeing the rear angled in parking and being a skeptic. You guys have done a great job in explaining why it's necessary, why it's needed. I just want to say that I actually am a big fan of the 3-lane cross section. I've been biking that way home and paying a lot of attention to whether or not vehicles are passing me, because I don't go up the hill on the WNOD. I cut in a couple of blocks down and I take the full lane, and I've never had a vehicle have to pass me from behind. This is a lower utilized section of roadway. I think the left turn lanes are so safe. They create actually improvements operationally because you don't have people weaving in and out of traffic. I'm very excited to see Arlington applying them on a lot of our four-way undivided cross sections. I would personally love to see it on Washington Boulevard, but I know that's a pipe dream. It's safer. I think it's a great prioritization of both making sure drivers are safe and making turning movements, at creating parking, and then creating the pedestrian space we need. I did have one little question because I read the document. You have a bullet on the kind of design objectives for the consideration of this either under or overpass, and one of them says consider a boardwalk design for the path. Could you elaborate on what that is? Because I personally have hated every single boardwalk designed bridge I ride my bike on in this area.
Yes. Which way do I want to go? No. When considering the underpass concept, we talk with our environmental staff, and one of the ways to create less impact on the slope, everything that you see where the pathway is south of the existing path is on the slope of the stream. So one way to minimize impact and the cut and fill that would be necessary to create a new pathway would be to do it as sort of a cantilevered boardwalk design.
So you're not talking necessarily about the type of pavement material, but of the building design. I don't know if you guys are still making amendments to this report or not, but I think that might actually be a nice detail to add, because when people think boardwalk design, they think about the slatted wood, and that made me grit my teeth just a little bit, especially after we had significant issue with the Mount Vernon Trail a couple of days ago. But again, thank you for coming to us. You guys have definitely brought us through and helped us understand why you're making the transportation decisions you did, and I really appreciate that.
Commissioner Lantalmi.
Yeah, I'd like to join those comments. I bike through there fairly regularly, and I deliberately look to see what the traffic is like, and that road could handle significantly more traffic without being stressed. Now, I've been through there weekends, weekdays. I haven't been there at rush hour. That's the one qualification I'll give on.
When I go through.
Well, then we're consistent then in seeing there's not a lot of traffic. There are a couple of minor things that I noted on here which you might want to correct on the transportation section. On page 3.29, the graphic there has 2 dots for proposed bike lane, but there's no proposed bike lane on the map itself. The two blue, and the next page on the box under Shirlington Road crossings, you have the word develop misspelled. It's small, but you don't want to do that. And then further forward on page 2.25 under mobility, the tables there under 2015, 2 of them have an asterisk, but the asterisk doesn't refer to anything. If it's supposed to, then you're missing something there, and if it's not, we should probably get rid of it because it's confusing.
Okay, on 2.25, the two, so the South 4 Mile Run and Walter Reed Drive station has an asterisk, and the note at the bottom says the ridership data for this station covers a portion.
Asterisk in front of that.
Okay, gotcha.
Instead of note, it should be an asterisk, so that's what was confusing about it. So thank you for clarifying that. Otherwise, it's a nice job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Boucher.
2 questions. Well, actually 3. How's this area zoned around 4 Mile Run?
So everything you see in purple is zoned for industrial use. And there is a small bit of C2 on the west side of Shirlington Road, and then there's some multifamily zoning at 24th and Glebe in the upper right.
And do we have any other kind of industrial zoning in Arlington County?
There are small parcels here and there. The Buck site adjacent to W&L High School is zoned for industrial use. There may be a couple of parcels still in East Falls Church. There are some properties in Crystal City here and there.
The bus depot.
Right.
But is it fair to say that this really is the only main industrial zoned area in Arlington County?
Right.
So my concern is that this is the only one, and I feel like the county's kind of trying to torch it up, and I think it needs to be very careful. Secondly, has Arlington County really reached out to those businesses along 4 Mile Run? Industrial businesses?
Yes. Well, in two ways. We had a 25-member working group, including some of the business and property owners. We had a...
Did it include those businesses, though? The collision repair shop,
we had representation from the people who own those properties, but we also had an open house discussion with the actual business operators. There's a business association that has been organized over the last several years, and so we work with them to have an info session to really talk with some of the operators in those businesses.
Well, I hope that's true. Anecdotally, I hear that it's not, and I think it's real important. This is the only main industrial zone area for Arlington County. And if you're going to, again, start gentrifying it and trying to make it look nice, you're going to lose those businesses because they really rely on their customers being able to park, being able to get there. And I understand that one business may be leaving, and I just think it's a real pity because it works currently, and just to make it look prettier, I think is not a best solution. So I just ask that you just be cautious, and I really hope the county reaches out to those businesses. Thank you.
Commissioner Boucher, can I ask you to expand on your remarks? Because this plan is creating, if anything, more parking in the area and is retaining the industrial zoning everywhere that it currently exists. So I'm trying to understand your concerns about gentrification when there is no upzoning happening and additional parking is being created and the county is talking about investing money in the area.
Well, I think getting back to this lovely picture where we have around 4 Mile Run where you're taking away a lane and you're putting in flower boxes and limiting parking. We have a nice pretty picture here.
So they're not eliminating parking. They're increasing parking on 4 Mile Run.
But you're taking away a lane.
Right, but that lane's not currently utilized.
I'm here to argue. I'm just giving my comments, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. So that is, and I'm getting some anecdotal. I have talked to a couple of businesses on 4 Mile Run, and they're not very happy with this program. That's not saying all of them. Maybe I'm talking to the minority. I don't know. But they're not happy about it. And again, this is zoned industrial. Do you understand what industrial means?
Yes, for instance, it's the only place that New District Brewing can exist.
So I just ask that we be just cautious and that the county really reach out to the businesses along. I think it's primarily 4 Mile Run. Maybe there's others, but I just think we need to be sensitive to that.
I would say I think this plan is, and that it is being not.
I'm just giving my opinion, Mr. Chairman, okay?
I'm just
I don't want to argue. I'm just giving an opinion.
Okay. May I?
Commissioner Clement.
Yeah, I hear both sides of this. Again, my chief concern is actually traffic. To be honest with you, this is a concern that travels through all the projects that we've considered this year, and obviously because that's what we do. But I'm concerned that the various proponents of the various plans are not doing adequate traffic impact analysis. And I'm also concerned that we are not anticipating the traffic impacts that will occur when the county expands to a population of, I think we're expecting 260,000 people by 2040. Mm-hmm. So I am encouraged to hear that a traffic impact analysis will be done for this particular site. But I'm really uncomfortable about the traffic impact analyses that have been presented to us on other projects, and would hope that the county takes a different approach.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
I do have a question for staff. In the past 15, 20 years, Arlington has really grown quite substantially. Am I correct that the VMT, the vehicle miles traveled, has not significantly increased?
That's correct.
So in many ways, the actual miles per person has actually dropped.
That again is correct. As far as the motorized or the single occupancy miles per month, yes.
Right.
As far as pedestrian, bike, and transit has gone way up.
Okay, so we have had no additional vehicle density, as a practical, to make a new term, over the past 15 years, despite a very, very substantial growth in the number of residents within this county.
That's correct. However, different corridors act in different ways.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Calkins.
Maybe, and I don't know exactly how we might broach this, but I know some of us are more versed in what the county does from a long-range transportation planning perspective, from a site impact planning perspective. I don't know if there's an opportunity for staff to maybe pull together a short white paper on kind of how they consider long-range transportation planning and how that's factored into like long-term decision-making, how that's considered by mode, and then also how that ties into site development review. Because I know some of us are really familiar with kind of how those processes work for the county and for the region and from a site-to-site case, but even just maybe like a one-page briefer on kind of like what is considered in all of these different stages might be very helpful for TC as a whole to understand kind of all of the very multiverse things that staff is looking at as they're looking at these applications, and even maybe a high-level description of the different softwares and tools that are used in the zoning cases, because they're pretty detailed, they're very nuanced, and they're hiring professional consultants to do these things. So just maybe having a general starting point for all of us to understand kind of what is done as part of this process and why it's done might be very helpful.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Sorry, you were okay. So you were just sighing, not actually starting to talk. So on my like 7th read through of this, I just noticed a couple things, Mr. Tucker, that I wanted to just highlight. I love the Walter Reed Drive underpass. I love the potential Shirlington Road underpass or overpass. I would love it if we could find a way to get them more integrated into the transportation section, in which I mean, like the Walter Reed Drive underpass is called out with its own little like letter in the bicycle section, but it's not just for bicycles, it's also for pedestrians. So like, I think it would be great if we could somehow make that more clear that this is not just a bicycle thing. And then like, it's awesome that the Shirlington Road underpass overpass gets its whole big like box, but it's kind of easy to miss it in the actual like bicycle and pedestrian section. Like it's not actually called out with a letter and stuff like all of the other improvements. So I'd love to see that more integrated, just because I know I've read so many sector plans at this point that you come to 8 years after they were passed, and it's easy skimming through to miss stuff when it's not like all together in the same section. It's in a call out box, or it's in the bike section, not the pedestrian section, or the pedestrian section, not the bike section. So it would also be great if they were on the map. If the potential underpasses, I know like the map seems to be more stuff that we're certain we're going to do, and the underpasses are more feasibility studies, but it would still, from a vision standpoint, it would be really nice to see them on 3.22. Anything else, folks? Then I move that we recommend the county board adopt the attached resolution to authorize advertisement of public hearings by the Planning Commission and the county board to consider adoption of the draft 4 Mile Run Valley area plan. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Item number 5, the shared mobility update, is we're actually going to have the update on November 1st. So staff was not, able to provide a good update. We just heard this item in our last meeting, but certainly you will hear it at the next meeting. As far as 6, other commission business, our next regular meeting is November 1st, also on a Thursday. So that's all staff had for this evening.
All right. As far as other commission business, I did just want to update the commission on the shared use mobility pilot. Just because I know not everybody watches county board meetings, the shared use mobility pilot was adopted, and the ultimate cap on how many devices they can put out was lifted, and the initial number of devices they can put out at the start was increased from 200 to 350. So a lot of that was in our letter, so it was great to see that, so just FYI. Though I suspect, given the change in weather that will be coming at the start of our pilot, that they're not going to be increasing the number of vehicles they have on the road until like March. Anything else for the good of the commission? Mr. Best, I believe we're going to need to identify a representative for the Salt Dome Working Group
That's correct.
and the Lee Highway Planning Working Group.
Again, correct.
All right, so those of you who have just finished up things like the Career Center Working Group or don't currently have a liaison position, please consider whether those are things you can commit to. I believe we also don't have anyone for the Education Center Public Facilities Review. So that's the old APS office building next to Washington Lee that is already had its first meeting. So we need somebody on that as soon as possible. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Have a good evening. Also, I'll note the time of the meeting, which is
Derelict in our duty.
okay, Rich.
Log off of this guy? Or?
Yeah, go ahead. No, because hold on to that.
Richard, are these yours?
Yes.
Did you guys fix the Arlington, Friedman Village Road? Did you guys finally fix that typo?
I don't know. I'll have to check.
I think you did.
Okay. I'm not involved in a lot of typos. Actually, I create a lot of typos. I'm not involved.